So I don't know about you, but I was pretty darn happy to see that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, filed articles of impeachment against Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. I think it's about time some of our elected officials started calling out the blatant corruption that we see on this Supreme Court. Whether it's taking millions of dollars from billionaire friends or flying flags that might be sympathetic to January 6ers days after an insurrection, somebody needs to be calling this stuff out. So let's go ahead and take a look at why AOC says she's filing these articles of impeachment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to introduce articles of impeachment against Associate Justices of the Supreme Court Clarence Thomas and Samuel Anthony Alito, Jr. Against Justice Thomas, the resolution includes 3 total articles: 1 count of failure to disclose financial income, gifts, reimbursements, property interest liabilities, and transactions, among other information, and 2 counts of refusal to recuse from matters concerning his spouse's legal and financial interests before the court. The second resolution includes the following impeachment articles against Justice Alito: 1 count of refusal to recuse from cases in which he had a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party before the court, and 1 count of failure to disclose financial incomes, gifts, reimbursements, property interests, among other information.
So I'm no dummy. The House is currently run by Republicans, and even if it were to pass the House, it would need to pass by a supermajority in the Senate. So it's pretty safe to say that this is probably a political stunt, but I think it is a good political stunt that needed to happen. I think the American people have lost most of the trust they had in the Supreme Court, especially because of the corruption that we see from Thomas and Alito, and because we have people like Chief Justice Roberts who won't even sit for a hearing or a meeting with Senate Democrats to try to figure out a code of ethics or something. What are our Congress people supposed to do? If the Supreme Court is not going to hold their own accountable, then it is up to one of the other co-equal branches of government to do that, whether it is the executive or the legislative. Somebody has to hold these people accountable, because the American people need to be able to trust in the institution of the court for it to be successful. And with the dramatic decline in trust, those odds aren't looking very good right now. So let's go ahead and listen to what else AOC had to say about why we should expect a Supreme Court justice to recuse.
These judicial standards require justices to recuse themselves in any proceeding where their impartiality might reasonably be questioned. In other words, if a person could reasonably believe that the legitimacy of a justice's judgment could be, or be perceived to be, compromised due to their personal involvement in the case or its parties, the standard is clear. The justice must recuse. They are required to recuse.
This should not be controversial for anybody. If one of the liberal justices was flying a Black Lives Matter flag and then wanted to rule on a Black Lives Matter case, conservatives would be losing their mind that liberal justice did not recuse. We should be holding these people to a higher standard. And I feel like in the past, they were able to hold themselves to a higher standard. They had more respect for the institution of the Supreme Court. But in modern times, that does not seem to be the case. If the American people, even if there's a perception that your bias might play a role in the way you rule on a case, you should recuse. I feel like these rules have been in place, should not be controversial, And if you don't like them as a Supreme Court justice, then you can resign. If you don't like that you're held to a higher standard than most other Americans because you have one of the most important jobs in our country, that's on you. Supreme Court justices cannot be voted out of office. They need to have a binding code of ethics that holds Supreme Court justices and other federal judges accountable for this type of corruption or this type of bias. So let's go ahead and look at Clarence Thomas and why AOC thinks his judgment could be skewed due to the millions of dollars in gifts he's received from Harlan Crow.
Justice Thomas received over the years include large loan balance cancellations, tuition payments for family, and vacations in private jets and yachts worth up to $500,000 alone. In total, Justice Thomas appears to have received more than $1.5 million worth in goods, cash equivalents, and services from Mr. Crow. And that is just what we know of.
I do not think it is unreasonable to ask Clarence Thomas to recuse in certain cases because of these gifts. And at the very least, he should be reporting these gifts. I'm pretty sure that's already laid out in their code of ethics, but he was apparently too good for the code of ethics and went years upon years upon years before reporting some of this stuff. It was only until ProPublica started digging into things that I think there was some disclosure. And ProPublica, I think, puts that figure even closer to $4 million. So while Clarence Thomas gets to live it up like a king and make rules for the rest of us, we should be able to expect for him to follow a basic code of ethics. And taking millions upon millions of dollars worth of gifts from right-wing billionaires seems like a problem to me. But let's go ahead and move on to Alito.
Now take Justice Samuel Alito, who has no shortage of billionaire associates of his own. After billionaire Paul Singer gave Justice Alito a luxury fishing trip on a private jet, a contribution that was also hidden from the public and the court, Justice Alito not only refused to recuse, but changed his mind regarding his gracious host's case. Just a short time after accepting the lavish undisclosed trip from Singer, Alito joined the court in reversing its previous position and took up Singer's case. He did not recuse. Justice Alito also refused to recuse in the case itself, ultimately leading to a ruling that netted Singer $2.4 billion.
I think that is just insane. You're changing your mind, changing your opinions, and you have a personal relationship with this millionaire, billionaire, whatever he is. I think that is just crazy. If you're personal friends with somebody with matters before the court, you need to recuse. I don't think that should even be a question. And that goes for anybody on the Supreme Court. But that's just talking about money contributions and wealthy friends. It is not against the rules to have wealthy friends. But when they have matters before the court, it is your duty to recuse. That way people don't feel that your connection to this person is influencing your decisions. But let's go ahead and move on to the Alitos in their January 6th sympathies. What does AOC have to say about that?
In January 2021, after the former President of the United States incited an insurrection on the Capitol in this chamber to interfere with the results of the U.S. election, Justice Samuel Alito and his wife flew an upside-down American flag, a symbol of solidarity with the attack, outside their home. 2 years later, they publicly displayed outside their home yet another incendiary symbol, a flag associated with extreme right-wing Christian nationalism. Justice Alito maintains that his wife, Martha Ann Alito, is the only one responsible for the flags. But common sense maintains that such a close and incendiary revelation requires recusal by the justice from January 6th related cases.
You know, I'm not one to say that some dude needs to be held fully accountable for the actions of his wife, but I feel like if you're a Supreme Court justice, there should be some common understandings of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And that should be not necessarily, an agreement that you have in your household. You guys make rules for the rest of the country, and then you're acting like none of the rules apply to you. I think that is unacceptable. And we even have Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, directly involved in the Stop the Steal stuff based on Donald Trump's lie that the election was stolen from him. This is just wild that there was no recusal for cases surrounding January 6th from Clarence Thomas here. Let's see what AOC had to say about that.
And finally, Justice Thomas, who is married to Virginia Thomas, a financially and personally involved operative in the Stop the Steal movement and Capitol attack, also joined opinions in these cases, even as clear evidence mounted that not only was his wife fully committed to overthrowing the results of a fair election, but she was actively lobbying members of the Trump administration attempting to do just that. The questions before the court had unquestionable implications for Thomas's wife and consequently Thomas himself, making his refusal to recuse one of the most shocking examples of conflict of interest in the court's history.
I would 100% agree with that. It is quite shocking that Thomas's wife was directly involved, texting Mark Meadows, I think it was, trying to get the 2020 election overturned. A free and fair election that was not stolen from Donald Trump. And then he's not going to recuse from January 6th related cases? That is crazy, people. Like I said, I know these articles of impeachment are likely to go nowhere. But I think it is good that we have our elected officials talking about the corruption that all Americans are seeing on this Supreme Court. Hopefully it opens up a conversation about a binding code of ethics for our Supreme Court justices. They should not be allowed to run roughshod and then try to dictate the rules to the rest of the country. People do not like that. They do not trust it. And the Supreme Court only works if the American people trust its rulings. That is paramount. So it is absolutely necessary that we hold these people accountable with a binding code of ethics. And if they don't feel like they can live up to a higher standard than the rest of us, then go ahead and step down. That is okay. But we need to get back to the day where each Supreme Court justice respects the institution of the court and behaves in a manner that doesn't show their biases all over the place. I do not think that is too much to ask. So good on AOC for filing these articles of impeachment. Hopefully it will start a very much needed conversation. So that's going to do it for me on this one, folks. If you got anything out of this video, if you could remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe, maybe share it with a friend or two, I'd very much appreciate that. If you think I got something wrong, or if you disagree with me about something, let's hash it out in the comments below. And if you want to learn about the insane amount of criminal activity in Trump's inner circle, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. And I will see you guys on the next one.